Retired Captain Kevin Jenkins was drinking his morning coffee when the phone rang at 7 a.m. His old habits had never changed: early rising, orderly life, keeping everything under control. The caller ID was familiar. Jenkins. "Kevin, it's me, David Morrison." His former commander's voice sounded tired. "I need you." Jenkins set his cup on the table. It had been 6 months since his last conversation with Morrison. Back then, it was also an unofficial mission offer. "I'm retired, David. Remember?" "Yes, but this is different. A special situation. In Afghanistan." Jenkins looked out the window. Life in the small Virginia town continued its normal flow. Children were going to school, people rushing to work. A peaceful, ordinary American morning. "I'm listening." "Do you know Carolina Chen?" "Journalist." From Conflict Chronicles magazine. Jenkins remembered the name. War correspondent. Brave, sometimes too brave. "Yes." 3 weeks ago, she got trapped in a village in northern Afghanistan. Taliban-controlled area. "We can't reach her through official channels." "Why are you coming to me?" Morrison's breathing became heavy. "Because you know the situation there. You've been on 3 missions in that region. And because we can't organize an official operation for diplomatic reasons." Jenkins maintained his silence. He knew these kinds of conversations. Unofficial, off the record, no responsibility operations. The team will be small. You, 2 more men. Get in and out. Clean and simple. Carolina Chen. No one else. Jenkins felt Morrison hesitate. There are civilians in the village too, but the priority is the journalist. Jenkins finished his coffee. Outside the window, an elderly man was walking his dog. Calm, peaceful. This conversation never happened, right? What conversation? Jenkins hung up the phone. Time to get his old equipment out of the closet. 3 days later, Jenkins met 2 men at a military base near the Pakistani border. He knew one of them, former Sergeant Tommy Sanchez, 38 years old, 3-time Afghanistan veteran. The second looked younger, Jake Sullivan. The young man introduced himself, intelligence specialist. Jenkins looked at him, 25, maybe 26 years old, clean-shaven, eager eyes. "How many times have you been in the field?" "This is my second mission, sir." Sanchez smiled. "Don't worry, Jenkins. The kid's good. He knows the languages, too." Jenkins spread the map on the table. The target village was in the foothills of the Hindu Kush Mountains, in an area where the Taliban was strong. The nearest friendly unit was 60 kilometers away. Carolina Chen is being held here, in the old school building in the center of the village. Report stopped 3 weeks ago. Sullivan studied the map. "Why are they keeping her there?" "The local Taliban leader sees Chen as trading material, in exchange for the release of imprisoned members." Sanchez nodded. "Classic. How do we get in?" Jenkins traced the route with his finger on the map. "Night operation. We walk 3 kilometers from the north. Security is weaker on the east side of the village. We go in, get Chun, and come back the same route." "How many civilians are in the village?" Sullivan asked. Jenkins looked at him. "Why?" "Just curious." "About 150 people, but that's not our problem. We'll get Chun and leave." Sanchez checked their equipment. "Light weapons, minimal gear. Quick in-and-out operation." "Where's the helicopter pickup?" Sullivan asked. Jenkins pointed to a spot on the map. 2 kilometers south. Open terrain. They'll be there 12 hours after the operation. Everything was planned as it should be. Clean, simple, effective. Entry into the village was easier than expected. At midnight, when the moonlight was weak, the 3 men quietly infiltrated from the east side of the village. The Taliban sentries were careless or too few. The old school building was in the center of the village. Single-story, dilapidated structure. There were 2 armed guards outside. Jenkins signaled his team. Sanchez approached from the left, Sullivan from the right. The guards were quietly neutralized. The inside of the building was dark. As Jenkins advanced with night vision goggles, he heard a woman's voice in corner. "Who's there?" Jenkins responded, "American military. We're here for Carolina Chen." A moment of silence. Then, "I'm Carolina." Jenkins found a woman, early 30s, thin but resilient looking. Next to her was an elderly Afghan man. "We're leaving," Jenkins whispered. "Can you move?" Carolina stood up. "Yes, but... Carolina looked at the elderly man. "These are villagers. The Taliban is holding them too. If they release me, they'll punish the villagers." Jenkins paused. This wasn't in the plan. Sullivan approached. "Sir, there's movement outside. Time is running short." Jenkins looked at Carolina. "How many people?" 20, maybe 25 families. There are children, too." Sanchez kept watch at the door while Jenkins thought. The mission was clear: rescue Carolina Chen. Nothing else. "Our mission is to get you out. Nothing else." Carolina's eyes hardened. "Then I'm not leaving here." Jenkins wasn't expecting this. "What do you mean?" "These people helped me. If the Taliban will punish them, I'll stay here too." Sanchez signaled from the door. Voices were coming from outside. Jenkins faced a difficult decision. "Chun, you're being ridiculous," Jenkins whispered harshly. "You'll die for these people." Carolina was determined. "These people are resisting the Taliban. My being here gives them courage. If I run away, what they'll do to them." The elderly Afghan man spoke. Sullivan translated. "He says the Taliban leader is coming to the village in the morning. If the American woman isn't here, they'll burn the village." Jenkins assessed the situation. Mission parameters were changing, but orders were clear: rescue Carolina Chen. Sanchez came over from the door. "Jenkins, Taliban patrol approaching. We have 5 minutes." Jenkins looked at Carolina. "These villagers aren't your responsibility, but it's my choice." Old orders. Old rules were spinning in Jenkins' mind. Mission first. Complete the objective. Don't deviate. But the determination in Carolina's eyes, the hope in the old man's face. This wasn't just a rescue operation anymore. Sullivan's radio crackled. "Base calling. Pickup team ready. Confirm status." Jenkins took the radio. "Package located." "Nature complications?" Jenkins hesitated. How would he explain? "Hostage not cooperating. Local civilian factor. Package refuses extraction without civilian population." A long silence came from the radio. Then, "Negative on civilian extraction. Orders unchanged. Package only." Jenkins turned off the radio. Carolina was looking at him. What did they say? Before Jenkins could answer, Sanchez gave the alarm. Movement outside. Multiple targets approaching. Time had run out. Jenkins made a quick decision. Sanchez, south exit. Sullivan, gather the villagers. Sullivan hesitated. "Sir? Orders." "New orders. All civilians. Move." Carolina looked in amazement. "Really?" Jenkins didn't look at her. He spoke to the elderly Afghan in English. Sullivan translated. The old man moved quickly. Within 5 minutes, the villagers were gathered. 23 people. Women, elderly, children. Some were sick. Some were wounded. Sanchez looked worried. "Jenkins, the helicopter can't take this many people." "It will." "How?" Jenkins opened the radio. "Base! This is ground team. Civilian extraction required. 23 souls. Negative ground team. Repeat, package only." Jenkins turned off the radio, then opened it again, switching to a different frequency. "Morrison." "Kevin? What the hell is happening?" Jenkins spoke openly. "David, these people will die. They're running from Taliban revenge. You need to make the helicopter bigger." "Kevin, orders are clear. Journalist only." Jenkins looked at the villagers. A little girl was crying, hugging her mother. An old man was trying to help his son walk. I can't leave these people here, David. Kevin, your career will be over. This is an unofficial operation. If civilians get involved. Jenkins turned off the radio. Carolina came to his side. Thank you. Jenkins looked at her. Don't thank me yet. We haven't gotten out yet. The exit from the village was harder than expected. A Taliban patrol had entered the village and was conducting searches. Jenkins led his team with the villagers through back alleys. Sullivan was helping a young mother with her baby. Sanchez had carried a wounded man on his back. Jenkins was directing the groups together with Carolina and the elderly village leader. At the village exit, the problem began. There was a Taliban checkpoint. 2 armed men were searching with lights. Jenkins stopped the group and assessed the situation. The roundabout way was too long. They couldn't make it by morning. The direct route was risky, but it was the only choice. Sanchez whispered, I'll take the first man, you take the second. Jenkins nodded, but as they were about to move, the young mother tried to calm the baby next to her. The baby started crying. The Taliban guards heard the sound. Flashlights turned toward the group. Jenkins moved quickly. He and Sanchez neutralized the guards in a synchronized manner. But there had been noise. Run, Jenkins ordered. The group quickly passed the checkpoint. Voices were coming from behind them. Taliban reinforcements were coming out of the village. A 2-kilometer run began. The elderly and children were struggling. Jenkins was constantly looking back, checking how close the Taliban was getting. At the halfway point, the young mother fell. The baby was crying. The woman was injured in her leg. Carolina stopped. We can't leave her. The thing that crossed Jenkins' mind was the old rule in the Army. Never leave a man behind. But did this apply to civilians? Sanchez picked up the wounded woman. I'll carry her. Sullivan checked the Taliban's position. About 10 minutes behind. They're expanding the search. Jenkins accelerated the groups. They ran until the helicopter pickup point came into view. When they reached the open terrain, the helicopter hadn't come yet. Jenkins looked at his watch. They were 30 minutes early from the scheduled time. Sullivan checked the radio. Nothing from base. Jenkins assessed the surroundings. Open field, no cover. If the Taliban reached here, they couldn't take a defensive position. The villagers were tired. Some were sitting while small children were trying to sleep next to their mothers. Carolina approached Jenkins. Will they really come? Jenkins scanned the horizon. They will. But inwardly he was worried. Would Morrison send a helicopter for this many civilians? The political consequences could be too risky. Sanchez approached. Jenkins, I found Taliban tracks. They're coming this way. Jenkins thought, if the helicopter didn't come, they needed an alternative plan. How far are they? 15, 20 minutes. Jenkins gathered the group. The helicopter may be delayed. There's an alternative route. The mountains to the south. The base is a 2-day walk from there. The elderly village leader spoke through Sullivan. He says the elderly and children can't make that walk. Jenkins knew the situation. These people couldn't walk for 2 days in those conditions. But staying here also meant death. Just then Sullivan pointed. Helicopter sound. The sound of helicopter rotors was coming from afar. Jenkins took out his binoculars and looked. Not one helicopter, but 2 helicopters were there. Morrison's voice came over the radio. Ground team, this is Morrison. 2 birds coming in. We'll take everyone. Jenkins relaxed. Copy that. Carolina smiled. Who is David Morrison? A good man, Jenkins replied. As soon as the helicopters landed, Jenkins took charge of the organization. Children and wounded to the first helicopter, adults and team members to the second. The loading process was fast but careful. Jenkins waited until he was sure the last person was on board. They could hear Taliban voices from afar, but it was too late. When the helicopters took off, Jenkins could finally breathe. Carolina was sitting next to him. Why did you change your mind? Jenkins looked down from the window. Afghanistan's mountains were still dangerous and beautiful. I didn't change it. You were right from the beginning. Sanchez smiled, old man getting soft. Jenkins looked at him. After retiring, a person sees some things differently. Sullivan was curious. What? Jenkins thought. How would he explain? For years, he lived according to orders, missions, objectives. But today, for the first time, he listened not only to orders, but also to his inner voice. Sometimes the right thing isn't what the orders say. A person needs to listen to the voice of their conscience. Carolina took note. This could be the title of my article. Jenkins looked at her. What article? The article I'll write about this operation. Jenkins was alarmed. Carolina, this operation is classified. You can't write it. Carolina smiled. Are you forgetting I'm a journalist? And this was an unofficial operation anyway. Jenkins called Morrison on the radio. David, this conversation being put on written record. Morrison's voice came relaxed. What operation, Kevin? Nothing happened today. Jenkins understood. Officially, this operation had never happened. It wouldn't appear in records. Carolina took out her notebook. Then I have to write the story. A week later, Jenkins was sitting with Morrison in his backyard in Virginia. They were drinking beer, talking about normal life. How are the Afghan villagers? Jenkins asked. Refugee program through Pakistan. Safe location. Kids started school. Jenkins was pleased. Carolina's article? Morrison smiled. Published in Conflict Chronicles. Anonymous retired officer saves Afghan civilians. Interesting read. Jenkins was curious. What did she write? Military ethics, impossible choices, human conscience versus orders. That kind of stuff. Jenkins thought. For years he had taken military ethics courses, but he didn't know it would be this complex in real life. David, did I do the right thing? Morrison looked at him. What do you think? Jenkins looked at the neighbor children playing in the backyard. A normal, safe, peaceful American neighborhood. Those people had a right to such a life too. Morrison nodded. In the military, sometimes you learn this. There's something as important as completing the mission. What's that? Doing the right thing. Jenkins finished his beer. He never expected to learn these things in retirement. Are there any other irregular operations? Jenkins asked half-jokingly. Morrison smiled. Why? Are you starting to miss it? Jenkins thought. He missed the action, the adrenaline, the purposefulness. But maybe he could do this differently. If it's a humanitarian operation, I might consider it. Morrison became serious. Actually, there's a problem in Sudan. Refugee situation. Unofficial help might be needed. Jenkins looked at him. Was Morrison serious, or was he joking? I'm listening. 2 months later, Jenkins was at the Sudan border. This time his team was different. Sanchez was there again, Dr. Amanda Foster instead of Sullivan as an experienced medic, and Khalil Hassan as a local guide and Sudanese-American translator. The mission was again humanitarian, rescuing international Red Cross workers trapped in a refugee camp. But this time Jenkins had approached it differently. Primary objective, aid workers. Secondary, if possible, help the refugees in the camp too. Foster asked, how many refugees are there? Jenkins showed the map. Reports say about 300 people, mostly women and children. Hassan added, local militia controls the camp. They're using the aid workers as bargaining chips. Sanchez returned to the old routine. Same shit, different country. Jenkins looked at him. Not exactly the same, Tommy. This time we're trying a different approach. During the mission planning phase, Jenkins learned this. Aid workers, Dr. Michael Wright and Nurse Lisa Park, had been captured by the militia while providing medical aid in the refugee camp. The militia was demanding ransom from the international community. But Jenkins' intelligence reports told a different story. The aid workers might have stayed voluntarily. The refugees' medical condition was critical. There was epidemic risk. Hassan, what's the militia leadership like? Commander Ismail Osman. Reasonable man, but desperate. He has to feed his followers. Jenkins changed his plan. We'll try negotiation instead of direct assault. Sanchez was surprised. Negotiation? With these mercenaries? Every desperate person has something they need more than what they have. Jenkins' approach was this: medical supplies and food in exchange for aid workers and safe passage for refugees. Foster asked, "Where will we find that many supplies?" Jenkins contacted Morrison. Using official resources for unofficial operations was risky, but possible. David, humanitarian aid package needed. Sudan border. Morrison hesitated. Kevin, this Sudan operation is getting complicated. State Department involved. Just medical supplies and food. Clean humanitarian aid. Morrison agreed. 48 hours. After that, you're on your own. Jenkins briefed his team. We have 48 hours to get everyone out. Aid workers and refugees. Hassan asked, if negotiation fails? Jenkins didn't give the traditional military response. Then we'll have to be creative. The approach to the militia camp was easier than Jenkins expected. Commander Osman agreed to a meeting, but on neutral ground. Old mosque ruins halfway between positions. Jenkins went only with Hassan. Sanchez and Foster waited in support positions at a distance. Osman looked 40-something, educated. He could speak English. American soldier, Osman greeted Jenkins. You came for your people. Jenkins was respectful but firm. I came to talk. You have aid workers. We have supplies. Osman showed interest. What kind of supplies? Jenkins gave his list. Medical equipment, antibiotics, food packages, water purification units. Osman examined. This is valuable, but I need more than supplies. What do you need? Osman explained. His militia was protecting the refugees, but their resources were limited. The international community had promised help, but hadn't delivered. Jenkins realized Osman's position was humanitarian, not military. The men were desperate, not evil. Commander, if you release the aid workers, international attention will increase. More aid will come. Osman thought, you guarantee this? Jenkins couldn't promise official aid, but offer an alternative. I can organize media coverage, direct contact with International Red Cross. Osman showed interest but had a concern. If aid workers leave, refugees won't get medical care. Jenkins thought of a solution. Dr. Foster, our medical expert, can stay temporarily until the aid workers are replaced. While Hassan was translating, Jenkins radioed the situation to his team. Foster immediately agreed. Of course I'll stay. Medical help is essential in this situation. Jenkins made the offer to Osman. Aid workers release, supplies delivery, temporary medical expert replacement, media coverage arrangement. Osman consulted with his team. 30 minutes later, he returned. Agreed, but one more condition. Jenkins waited. Safe passage for refugees. New location, away from conflict zone. Jenkins wasn't expecting this. Relocating 300 refugees was a major undertaking. Radio contact with Morrison. David, refugee relocation package needed. 300 people. Morrison's voice sounded tired. Kevin, this operation scope is expanding. Budget implications. Jenkins understood. Unofficial operations had limited resources. But what was the alternative? David, these people are trapped in a conflict zone. Without relocation, medical aid is only a temporary solution. Morrison long paused. I can contact UNHCR. Official refugee relocation program. But the process takes time. Jenkins explained the situation to Osman. Relocation is possible, but time is needed. Official channels through UN. Osman negotiated. We don't have time. Rainy season is starting. Camp conditions will get worse. Jenkins thought of a creative solution. Immediate temporary relocation. Move to a safer location, then official process. 2-step plan. First safe temporary camp, then permanent solution. Osman made a final consultation with his team for a final agreement. Jenkins waited, aware that time was running short. Agreement reached. Aid workers released. Supplies delivered. Refugees temporarily relocated to safer area. Official UN process initiated. Operation began. Foster started medical work in the camp. Jenkins and Sanchez escorted the aid workers to the safe zone. Hassan organized the relocation of refugee families. Dr. Wright and Nurse Park were exhausted but grateful when released. Dr. Wright thanked Jenkins. These people are in desperate condition. The epidemic risk is real. Jenkins was curious. Why did you stay voluntarily? Wright explained. We didn't understand the military situation at first. Then we realized the militia is protecting these people from hostile forces, not holding them. Jenkins realized his understanding had been limited. The situation was very complex. Good guys and bad guys weren't black and white, but gray shades. Nurse Park added, Commander Osman has an educational background. Before the conflict, he was a school teacher. Jenkins was surprised. This information wasn't in the intelligence reports. Hassan explained, when the conflict started, Osman was forced to protect his village. He didn't want to become a military leader, but circumstances forced him. Jenkins' perception shifted. Osman wasn't a typical warlord, but a reluctant leader forced by circumstances. The relief operation continued. Medical supplies delivered. Temporary camp established. Refugee families moved to safer location. Foster sent daily reports. Medical situation improving. Supplies making a difference. But long-term solution is essential. Morrison checked progress. Kevin, UNHCR responding positively. Official refugee status processing is starting. Jenkins felt satisfied but understood these types of situations were ongoing, not one-time solutions. Sanchez observed, Jenkins, you've changed. Before mission complete done. Now, you're thinking bigger picture. Jenkins reflected. Military training is narrowly focused. Real-world problems are complex. Simple solutions are rare. Hassan got philosophical. My grandfather said, good warrior knows when to fight. Better warrior knows when not to fight. Best warrior knows how to make fighting unnecessary. Jenkins appreciated this wisdom. In his military career, he had mostly focused on the first category. Now, learning the other categories. Operation conclusion. Aid workers safe. Refugees relocated. Militia peacefully transitioned to community support role. Foster completed her temporary assignment. Trained local medical staff. Organized supplies distribution. Jenkins had a final meeting with Osman. Commander, thanks for the peaceful transition. Osman replied, you showed respect, offered real solutions. Most outsiders command or ignore. You listened. Jenkins learned something important. Effective help sometimes required changing your own assumptions. Returning to Virginia, Jenkins reflected on the operation. Traditional military mission success criteria. Objective completed. Personnel safe. Minimum resources used had been achieved. But additional criteria now mattered. Humanitarian impact, long-term stability, local relationships. Morrison debriefed. Kevin, operation successful. Aid workers rescued. Refugee situation stabilized. International cooperation established. Jenkins nodded but felt different. David, there's a pattern to these operations. Every time the same thing, crisis, intervention, temporary solution. Morrison agreed. True, but what's the alternative? Ignoring these situations? Jenkins thought. Prevention, maybe? Upstream intervention. Action before crisis develops. Morrison was interested. Explain. Jenkins organized his experiences. In Afghanistan, villagers were resisting Taliban pressure but had no support. In Sudan, Osman was trying to protect the community but had no resources. Common thread, local people know solutions, but capability is missing. Morrison understood. You're suggesting capacity building instead of direct rescue operations? Combination of both. emergency response when needed, but local empowerment for sustainable support. Morrison asked practically, where would funding for this approach come from? Jenkins was realistic. Not from military budget, obviously. But hybrid approach is possible, combining defense cooperation with humanitarian aid. Morrison noted, developing this concept could be interesting for you. There are consulting opportunities in this area for retired officers. Jenkins hadn't considered this possibility before. Career change late in life, but an opportunity to continue meaningful work. David, are there other operations pending? Morrison smiled. Always. But next time, you take the lead role. Strategy development, team training, partnership building. Jenkins accepted. Retirement could have a new definition, continuing service in a different way. 3 months later, Jenkins was sitting in his Virginia home when Carolina called. Kevin, I'm writing a follow-up article about military professionals transitioning to humanitarian work. Jenkins was interested. What's the angle? How combat experience translates to conflict resolution. You're a good example. Jenkins agreed to the interview. What do you want to know? What changed you? Jenkins looked out his window at the peaceful neighborhood, realizing that strength isn't just about winning fights. Sometimes it's about preventing them. Any regrets about leaving military service? Jenkins smiled. I didn't leave service. I just changed how I serve. Carolina, finish your notes. One last question. What's next? Jenkins considered this. After the Sudan operation, he'd been contacted by other organizations, opportunities for consultation, training, mediation. But something felt different now. Actually, Carolina, I think I'm done with operations. Really? Why? Jenkins walked to his backyard. The garden he'd planted last spring was growing well. Tomatoes, peppers, herbs. Simple, peaceful growth. I spent 30 years solving problems by going places. Maybe it's time to solve problems by staying put. Carolina was confused. What do you mean? Jenkins gestured his garden. There are veterans in this town dealing with PTSD. Single mothers struggling to pay rent. Kids who need mentoring. Problems don't just exist in war zones. Carolina understood. Local humanitarian work. Something like that. Jenkins picked a tomato from his plant. Sanchez is teaching mechanics at the community college. Hassan is working with refugee resettlement here in Virginia. Maybe it's time I figured out how to help my own neighborhood. Carolina smiled. That's actually a beautiful ending to the story. Jenkins agreed. Sometimes the best missions are the ones close to home. After Carolina left, Jenkins called Morrison. David, I'm officially retiring from irregular operations. Morrison laughed. What changed your mind? Jenkins looked at his peaceful street. Mrs. Patterson, next door, was struggling with her groceries. The Henderson kid was sitting alone again, probably having trouble at school. Realized I don't need to travel to foreign countries to find people who need help. Morrison understood local service. The simplest kind. Jenkins helped Mrs. Patterson with her groceries, then sat on his porch. For the first time in months, he wasn't planning an operation, checking equipment, or preparing for deployment. He was just a retired soldier, sitting in his own backyard, in his own country, thinking about how to help his own neighbors. Sullivan called that evening. Sir, heard you're staying local now. Jenkins smiled, something like that. Any advice for those of us still doing the overseas work? Jenkins thought about everything he'd learned. Remember that every mission teaches you something about people. Use those lessons wherever you end up. That night, Jenkins sat quietly on his porch. No emergency calls, no crisis situations, no life or death decisions. Just the sound of crickets, the peaceful rhythm of a small American town at night. Tomorrow he would start something new, being helpful without being heroic, serving without traveling, making a difference without making headlines. Sometimes the best mission was the one that felt like no mission at all. The journey had come full circle.